Hello, and welcome to ONET Academy. This previously recorded webinar is part of the ONET Academy webinar series, a set of online training presentations. This webinar recording, an ONET Academy briefing, how to download and use the Computerized Interest Profiler and Work Importance Profiler, will start momentarily.
And there's going to be three main areas that I want to call to your attention. The first of these is the presentation slide area. It's taking up the majority of your screen, and it's filled with the title slide of the PowerPoint we're working from today, how to download and use the Computerized Interest Profiler and Work Importance Profiler. It's going to be the main visual component for today's session. It's going to be the main focus of your attention throughout today's session. Now, to the top left of your screen, there's an attendee list. It just displays a list of everyone who's logged into the session with you. Directly below that attendee list, there is a chat feature. You can use that chat to submit questions and comments either to Dr. Wall or myself throughout today's session. So at any point, if you have a question or comment, feel free to use that chat. And to do so, you'll notice that there's a white horizontal text box. At the bottom of that chat, just mouse over, left-click in that text box, type in your question or your comment, and then click the arrow button to the right to submit. Now, if you haven't done so already, I'm going to ask that you tell us a little bit about yourself, just to familiarize yourself with the chat, and so we can glean some an understanding of who's joining us. So just please type in who you are, your name, where your organization, where you're located in the country, and how many people, if any, are attending the session with you today. So just mouse over, left-click in that text box, type that info in, and then click the arrow button at the right to submit. Now, while you're doing that, I just want to let you know, today's session is being recorded. We're going to be making the recording available along with the PowerPoint today, available to you, most likely before close of business today. So if you're wanting to download the PowerPoint or go back and review the recording, all you need to do is go to the recorded webinar section of ONET Academy, and you'll be able to download the PowerPoint or, as like I said, review the recording. Or you can even forward those links along to a colleague if you'd like. All right, with that, I want to turn things over to our presenter, Dr. Janet Wall. Janet?
Gary, thank you, and welcome to all of you. My name is Janet Wall, and I am an independent consultant, and Mayor & Mayor is one of my clients, and I've been doing recorded webinars or webinars live and recorded for them for about 5 or 6 years now. A whole lot of good information available to a lot of people, and I've had the opportunity to meet some very interesting people as well. So thanks very much for being with us today. My area of interest tends to be in program evaluation, assessment, career development, occupational information, and I'm also a certified global career development facilitator. I want to apologize a little bit in advance. I have a raspy throat today, and so there may be times when I have to step away from the phone and cough, but I will try to move through this webinar with the strongest voice that I can muster. So today we are focusing on the two computerized instruments available from the U.S. Department of Labor, the Computerized Interest Profiler and the Work Importance Profiler. And as a result, I have three major goals that I'd like for us to accomplish today. The first is to learn how to actually find those instruments and download them onto your computers so that you can actually use them. And the second major goal is to go in a little more detail on each of these instruments to show you how you actually use it, the kind of instructions given to people, the kinds of reports that are provided. And then, as you know, with any of the DLL instruments, the major purpose is to show people compatible occupations. And so what we will be doing is seeing how the occupational information is then matched up to ONET Online, which has extensive information about the variety of ONET occupations within the system. So with that in mind, well, how do you find the instruments? Well, they are available on onetcenter.org, which is the ONET Resource Center. And the ONET Resource Center is basically the portal where you can find about any kind of information about the ONET occupations, any of the technical reports, the users' reports, any supplementary information, and so on. So anything you want to know about ONET is probably on this website in one way or another. Also, some of the latest information and new information that becomes available gets posted here as well. So if you haven't visited the Resource Center, by all means, spend some time doing so, and you'll see the wealth of information that is provided there. But for purposes of today, what we want to do is find the ONET Career Exploration Tools. And if we go to that home page and take a look at the left-hand side, there are a bunch of links. And there's a section with products. And then under products, there's a section that I have outlined in red here, Career Exploration Tools. And one would click on that, and that brings you to a section that focuses on the ONET Career Exploration Tools. And there is a drop-down menu that you can utilize to obtain information on the Ability Profiler, the Interest Profiler, the Computerized Interest Profiler, the Work Importance Locator, and the Work Importance Profiler. Since we are interested in the computerized versions today, we would click on either the Computerized Interest Profiler or the Work Importance Profiler. If we do that and scroll down to the bottom of that page, what we have is a section where we can actually download the software. And you can see that you can download, and here we have the Work Importance Profiler software and the Work Importance Profiler User's Guide. Now, one would assume that by clicking on that, we would just download the Work Importance Profiler. In fact, what happens is you're able to download both instruments, the Interest Profiler and the Work Importance Profiler. So what you would do is you certainly want to download the User's Guide because that has great information for you on how to utilize the instruments, how to interpret the information, and some developmental information as well. But for us here, we're going to work on downloading the software. So you would click on the WIP software, and you see that it's a zip file, which means it's a compressed file. The file is actually bigger than what we see here, but it is compressed to 7.3 megs. And so at some point in the process, we're going to have to unzip that file, and I'll show you how that works. So we click on WIP software, and what it does is it asks the question, and take a look at the top left-hand corner. Do you want to open or save this file? Well, you want to save the file. So you would click on Save, and the screenshot on the bottom right-hand corner shows you that it is actually pulling that file from onetcenter.org onto your computer. And in order to show you the screen, I used a dial-up connection. And with a dial-up connection, it takes probably about 30 minutes or so to download it. Clearly, if you have a high-speed connection, it would work a whole lot faster. Once it's downloaded, then you would click on that file, and up would come the capability of unzipping it and eventually installing it onto your computer. So the top left-hand screenshot is Welcome to the Compressed Zip Folder Extraction Wizard. And you follow the directions there. And what you would do from that point is to select where you want the files to go on your computer. And you can put them anywhere. I have placed the files in program files, ONET assessment tools, but you can put them anywhere you want on your computer. So you tell it the location, and you can do that by going to Browse and then finding the section in your computer where you want to actually place these files. And then you would click on Next. And what happens then is that it says, okay, what programs do you wish to install? And if you take a look at the top right-hand corner, you have 4 options that come up. You have the Interest Profiler standard version, or the typical version, the real instrument. The Interest Profiler demo, which is a demonstration. It's a hardwired situation where you don't have to go through the whole instrument to get to the results. The Work Importance Profiler standard version, and the Work Importance Profiler demo. Now, I have downloaded on my computer all 4 of those files, and you can do the same thing merely by making a check mark in those boxes next to the name of the instrument. Should you only want 1, 2, or 3 of those files, you just check off the ones you want. So you don't have to download all 4. You can download just the demos, perhaps, or just the standard version. So it's up to you and how you're going to use the instruments. If you're actually going to use the instruments with people who want results and want to see which occupations are compatible with their interests or with their work values, you actually want to download the standard version, because that gives an individual the opportunity to input their own information and come up with their own results. If you're in a position where you're merely training people on how to use the instruments and the various characteristics of the instruments, the demo versions work just fine. But every time you use the demo version, you're going to get the same results because it's hardwired to have the same results. And that's so you don't have to go through all of the 180 items, for example, on the interest profiler to get some results. You can do it much, much quicker. All right, once you make that decision, then you have another decision to make, and that's the type of installation that you want. And the files will be slightly different for a standalone version versus a network version. Now, if you're wanting to use the instruments on standalone computers, you can download the standalone version on each of the computers where you want people to have access. If you're in a situation where you have a set of network computers in a room or in an agency or institution, you might want to download the network version. In that instance, I'd probably call in your network administrator to make sure that they're happy with the way it's being installed and there aren't any particular things that they have to do to make it work. So it's good to involve them with the network version. Standalone version, at one point when I was teaching a group of school counselors about the instruments, I was able to download these 2 instruments on about 30 computers in about, I would say about 40 minutes of time. So it doesn't take very long at all, especially, again, if you have a high-speed connection. But if you're using the standalone version, each computer needs to have its own program. Once you do that, what happens is the program gets installed on your computer or in your network, and it puts a little icon for each of the instruments on your desktop. So what you have here in this screenshot is a picture of my desktop, and you can see outlined in red the little icons for each of the versions and each of the instruments, and also the standard version and the demo version for each one. So I have the opportunity to use any of the 4 that I wish. And if I want to use the demo version for the interest profiler, I merely click on that icon, and up the instrument will come. Again, it's extremely easy to do. What I want to do now, that sort of gives you an overview of what you have to do to get the instruments onto your computers. What I want to do now is spend a little time on each of the instruments and how the computerized version looks. In general, the Department of Labor really did a pretty good development effort for these instruments. It was a development that took several years, which is extremely appropriate for a high-quality instrument. A lot of people walk around thinking that you can develop any of these instruments in a couple months of time, maybe even a day or so. But good instruments take several years to develop because of the variety of input and testing that you need to do to make sure your items are good, the instrument is good, it's appropriate for certain groups of people, and so on. There's a user guide that's associated with each of the 2 instruments that we're reviewing today that actually goes over some of the development stages and how it was done. And you'll see that it's a very methodical, purposeful process that was utilized. At every stage, there was input by users and potential users. There was research done on construct validity and reliability. There's information on the fact that it's self-administered and self-interpreted, and it takes about 30 minutes to do each of the instruments. I would say that the work importance profiler probably takes a little bit longer than that, I've seen people take up to 45 minutes a time. For the interest profiler, I've seen people do it in, roughly 15, 20 minutes. So it just depends on the person. There are no time limits, so it really doesn't matter. I had a question come in already. How is the demo version different? The demo version is, for example, in the interest profiler, the demo version looks the same as the standard version, but you don't have to answer all of the items in order to get to the end, showing the results, showing occupations. You can skip past it. And it's used, the demo version is used primarily for training people or instructing people on the generalities of the instrument. It does not provide unique information for an individual. You get the same results every time you use the demo. And that's so that if you're using this with other people, you can actually demonstrate the program in, say, 10 minutes or so. If you use the standard version, you would have to answer every item and eventually get to the results and the set of occupations. And each time you would use it, the results would be different because your input would be different. So again, the demo version is to demonstrate each of the instruments. All right, more on the instrument's strengths. Simple and easy to follow instructions. And I mentioned the user's guide, which I highly recommend that you take a look at before using any of these instruments. And, of course, the benefit being that the results are linked to the ONET occupation, which is, again, the main purpose of career exploration is to find compatible occupations. All right, let's focus now on the computerized interest profiler. If you take a look at the paper-pencil version of the interest profiler, which I'm assuming that most, if not all of you have done, you would see great similarities in the two instruments. The items are exactly the same. They're presented in the same order. The coloring, color used is exactly the same. So it would be very, very familiar to people. Like the paper-pencil instrument, it measures Holland's vocational personality theory, and that basically helps people understand what their dominant interest areas are in relationship to the 6 areas measured, which would be realistic, investigative, artistic, social, enterprising, and conventional, the Holland reassess codes. One of the reasons that the Holland vocational personality theory is used by not only the interest profiler, but several other commercial instruments is because it is pretty easy to understand, and it's really widely accepted and used by counselors all across the country. It's been a theory that's been around for a whole long time, and again, it's easy to grasp onto for most people. And I have another question that's just come in. What is the age-appropriate group for these instruments? It's the same as the paper-pencil instruments, which is basically around, I would say, around 8th grade or so and up. All right, the instruments are very easy to use, and they're very well received by students and clients. All right, again, the interest profiler measures 6 major areas. I mentioned the reassess codes: realistic, investigative, artistic, social, enterprising, and conventional. And reassess comes from the first letter of each of those words, R-I-A-S-E-C. Very quickly, I'm going to go over the definitions of each of those areas, but the user's guide provides more information. And, of course, Holland's theory is part of a lot of career development programs, so most of you, I imagine, are quite comfortable and quite familiar with these. And the realistic area is basically where people in occupations that use equipment or instruments of some sort, outdoors, working with animals. Typical occupations within that category are listed there: construction workers, automotive mechanics, electricians and technicians, engineers, and architects. The investigative is, these are the problem solvers of the world. They like to collect data, analyze data, make conclusions, solve problems. So typical occupations include computer systems analysts, archaeologists, forensic science technicians, psychiatrists, and surgeons. Then we have artistic occupations, and they're pretty well described. These are the creative people, creative in a variety of different ways. Graphics designer, actors and musicians, creative writers, floral designers, and so on. Next category is social. These are people who want to help other people solve problems, make the world a better place. The helper bees of the world. Typical occupations in that category: crossing guards, physical therapists, teachers, psychologists. Enterprising. These are the Donald Trumps of the world. People who like to lead people, people who like to sell ideas or things. So door-to-door salespeople, real estate agents, chefs and head cooks, judges and lawyers. And the last category, conventional. These are the detailed people. They like columns of numbers to add up accurately. They like things to be filed exactly right. They like things alphabetical or numerical. They like to follow the rules. So typical occupations are clerks and secretaries, computer operators, accountants, actuaries. And that little graphic that I have there is a librarian, and so librarian would be in that category as well. So we have here the 6 areas that are measured by the Computerized Interest Profiler: realistic, investigative, artistic, social, enterprising, and conventional. All right, well, I'm going to be using sections from the demo version of the Computerized Interest Profiler. Again, if you use the standard version, you have to answer each item according to your preferences, and you would end up with information that is unique to you. But the demo version, as I mentioned, is hardwired to get the same results all the time, so you don't have to go through every item. There are 180 items on the Computerized Interest Profiler, and you can imagine how long it will take if you demonstrate this time and time again. So the demo version short-circuits that. So, Computerized Interest Profiler. There's a lot of directions, a lot of information that comes prior to even starting the instrument. So you're about to take the ONET Computerized Interest Profiler. You're going to answer some questions that will help identify your work-related interests, and it eventually to help you explore occupations. It's not a test. Take your time and enjoy. Gives you an opportunity to learn how to navigate through the instrument. Now, most people these days get that quite quickly and easily. But there are a number of people who may not be as familiar with computer navigation as others, and so there are some directions. You see this button, it takes you forward. That button takes you back. If you want to quit, just press stop. Use the left button of your mouse in order to answer the questions. Here's how it works. There's a series of questions about work activities. Your job is to read each question carefully and make a determination as to whether or not you want to do this activity, you would like to do this activity. All right, there's some practice items. And for any good instrument, be it computerized or paper and pencil, you really need to have practice items. And the reason is that you want to make sure that people understand what they're supposed to be doing so that they can actually address the questions and focus on the questions rather than worry about what they're supposed to do. So there's some directions here. If you would like doing this work, click on the L or type L. If you dislike doing this work, click on D or type D. If you're unsure, then click on the question mark or type question mark. And I had a question come in, is there a minimum reading level needed to use these assessments? Yeah, typically it's about the 8th grade level. In fact, that was part of the development process. There was a screening stage at which a group of experts attempted to make a decision as to whether or not the items were higher than the 8th grade level. And if they were higher than the 8th grade level, they were rejected. All right, so what we have here, after we've learned what we're supposed to do, we've practiced some of the items, up comes the actual instrument, and this is one of the screens. And if you have a copy of the paper pencil instrument, you will see that it's exactly the same as the paper pencil instrument in terms of the items and the order and the color and so on. So on both the paper pencil instrument and the computerized instrument, the first item is build kitchen cabinets. And you would look at that item and say, I like doing that, I don't like doing that, or I'm unsure. And you would click on L, D, or question mark. The next item, guard money in an armored car. Third item, study space travel. Fourth item, make a map of the bottom of the ocean. Fifth item, conduct a symphony orchestra, and so on down the line. And for each of these items, the person would go through and say, oh, I like that, dislike that, not sure, like it, dislike it, and so on, all the way through. And I get through the first page, and then they would go on to the second page, and they would do like, dislike, unsure for all of the items, all 180 items, until they were complete. Once that's done, then, unlike the paper pencil instrument where you have to score the profiler yourself, the computerized version does it for you. And so after the person has answered all 180 items, their results are shown. And again, this is the hardwired demo version. So here are your interest profiler results. You got a realistic score of 20, investigative 10, artistic 28, social 12, enterprising 30, conventional 14. So what the program does then is identifies the person's top 3 interest areas. So you can see that enterprising is the most dominant interest area, artistic is next, and realistic is third. And all 3 others are lesser, less dominant. And I had another question come in, what do the colors indicate? I wouldn't worry about the colors. It's primarily to make it interesting to people. However, if you take a look at the paper pencil instrument, what a person does when they self-score is they would take a look at all the green area likes that they have and all the red area likes that they have and all the orange area likes that they have and so on in order to self-score. So it helps people track their results. For the computerized version, it doesn't matter because the computerized version scores it for you. So the colors really are not particularly meaningful. They do happen to associate with each of the 6 areas, but that's really irrelevant for purposes of this instrument. Another question that I see has come in, what's the maximum number of likes someone could have on a Holland dimension? On this instrument, it's 30. So they can get up to 30 in each category. Let's see. Okay, another question that has come in. Let me address that one later on. I want to make sure that I finish the information here. But I will address that at some more appropriate point in time. So thank you for sending that question in. All right, so the person's top 3 areas are enterprising, artistic, and realistic. On the next screen that they get, again, is the 6 areas with the 3 most dominant indicated in red. And here is where they can click on any of those terms and find out more about what those terms really mean. So they're going to be short definitions of each of those 6 areas. From here also, the person can print out their results and also print out the descriptions of each of the 6 interest areas. One of the things before they get their list of occupations that they have to do is to select a job zone. And a job zone is merely the amount of education, training, and experience that is generally required by occupations. In the ONET system, job zones run from 1 through 5, with 1 being the least amount of education, training, and experience, and 1 being the highest level of education, training, and experience. So the person is asked to do one of 2 things, at least initially. Their current job zone, where they are now, or a future job zone, where they aspire to be in the future in terms of their education, training, and experience. So they can pick either one, and actually the program allows the person to go back and forth and select any job zone, any of the 5 job zones. So this is not something that you don't have an opportunity to take a look at another job zone. It's freely available for people to go back and forth and take a look at all the lists that would come up. So again, they pick current job zone or future job zone. If they want more information about the job zones, they could click on one of these cards and more information would be provided. And the next 5 slides give you a general idea of what's involved in each of the job zones. So here's job zone 1, and I'm not going to read it to you, but take a glance at the information. Here's job zone 1. Job zone 2. Job zone 3. Four. And 5. All right, so once they make their decision and they select a job zone that they want to utilize, they're given this information. Again, their top 3 interest areas and their job zone. And from here, they can change their job zone to any of the others, or they can search for occupations that match up with their interest profile and their job zone. And up comes a listing of occupations that are compatible with the person's interests and the job zone that they've selected. And again, from here, they can switch job zones. So we're looking at a job zone 4 listing, but from here they can switch to a job zone 1, 2, 3, or 5 and see what comes up on the list. Each of those listings match up with the interest profile of the person. And again, we're using the demo version, so every time you use the demo version, this is what's going to come up. Okay, that's the interest profiler. And now I would like to address the question that came in from Oregon. We currently use micro skills in our employment department field offices. Should we have our job seekers also use this program, or are the programs so similar that they don't need to do both? I am, and it's assuming I am familiar with micro skills. I am not familiar with micro skills. If micro skills actually is based on Holland's vocational personality theory, then what you can do with the results probably is to go to the listings of occupations that are part of the paper pencil instrument, so the master listing of occupations, and you can take a look at the groups of occupations by interest area. Or you can go to ONET Online and search by interest area, and again, the interest areas of Holland's vocational personality theory. So if microskills uses Holland's vocational personality theory, probably the results in terms of one's dominant interest areas are possibly the same. I will take a look at the technical information involved with microskills to make sure it's a good instrument. I tend to be pretty much on top of the instruments that utilize the RIASEC code, and since I'm not familiar with microskills, it's either a very small specialized instrument, and maybe it's not based on Holland's theory. So again, it depends on the output of microskills as to whether or not, and the technical quality as to whether or not you can use it for finding occupations. All right, moving on to the work importance profiler. This measures work values, and it's also based on 30 years of research. And basically, the theory indicates that if your work values are satisfied, then you tend to be happier on the job and more productive. Okay, there's a question that came in on job zones that I'd like to address. If you ask for job zone 3, will it give you a list including job zones 1 and 2 also, or do you have to look them up separately? You look them up separately. So again, this is not a selection instrument, and it's an exploration instrument. But you can take a look at job zone 1 and job zone 2 occupations by clicking on that particular job zone. So it's not that they're not available, it's that the lists are separate. They're in a sense, 5 separate lists, and you take a look at that list by clicking on one of those numbers. All right, I mentioned that the interest profiler paper-pencil version and the computerized version look a lot the same. It actually looks like the computerized version is just a page turner of the paper-pencil version. That's not the case with the work importance profiler. The look and feel is very different from the paper-pencil version. If you're familiar with the paper-pencil version, you know it's a card sort, and you take various, you take 20 statements and you categorize them as being the most important, next most important, next, and next, from most to least, and then you score it and see what your work values are. This instrument, the computerized instrument, includes both a ranking and a rating phase. So it's not like the paper-pencil version, although the need statements are the same. The process is different. The areas that are measured on the work importance profiler are achievement, seeing the results of your efforts, letting you use your best abilities, getting a feeling of accomplishment on the job. Typical occupations are listed there: firefighters, police officers, pilots, surgeons. Independence, doing things on your own, having a job where you make your own decisions. Sales reps, talent directors, training and development specialists, astronomers. Recognition, occupations with good advancement possibilities, high prestige jobs, potential for leadership. We see typical occupations: models, athletes, education administrators, music directors. Relationships, places where you work with other people, your coworkers are friendly, service to others, jobs that don't make you go against what you think is right. Support, company that stands behind its workers, management style is comfortable, jobs and companies with a reputation of treating employees well. Typical occupations: office clerks, retail salespersons, machinists, loan officers. And the last area, working conditions, that the pay, lifestyle, work style is compatible. Telemarketers, agricultural inspectors, desktop publishers, actuaries. And so in review, what the work importance profiler measures are those 6 areas listed: achievement, independence, recognition, relationships, support, and working conditions. All right. Again, using the demo version. First screen comes up with indicating it's a work importance profiler, and then also, like the interest profiler, directions. Computer-based questionnaire. It's going to help you discover your work values, and eventually with occupations that fit the work values. You can find out what's important to you on a job, and occupations that will satisfy what's important to you. Remember, there are no right or wrong answers. There's no time limit. Take your time. The ranking phase is about to come up. Each statement describes something you could find at work. What a person is supposed to do is to read these 5 statements and indicate which of those 5 statements is most important out of the 5, and second most important, and third most important, fourth, and fifth. So they rank each of these 5 statements, one against the other. And you can see that this is screen 1 of 21. So the person would click on, say, I could be busy all the time, is the most important out of those 5. And then the second most important, I could try out my own ideas. And then they would look for the third one. And the one at the bottom, the job would provide an opportunity for advancement. Well, that would be the third most important. And so they would click on that. And you can see that it actually moves that statement up to the third position, indicating that it's number 3 out of those 5. Then they would make a selection of the other 2, which of those other 2 is next most important. When they rank order those 5 statements, after they're done, what actually happens is the screen changes color to show that the person has completed this particular screen or this particular set of 5 statements. Again, see, we're still on screen 1 of 21. And really what happens here is that every statement is compared against every other statement. So you go through 21 screens in order to do that. So we see here screen 2 of 21, and there are 5 new statements, but you will see that statements are repeated several times. This is because every statement is ranked against every other statement. So the person would do this for all of the 21 screens. And once they are done, they're asked whether or not they want to change any answers. And by this time, I think most people have no intention of changing any of the answers because it's taken a fair amount of time to get to this point. So they would push on. But they're not done. They just finished the ranking phase. Now we go through the rating phase. And what the person has to do is to rate each of the 21 statements. They would click on the Y if the statement describes something that they would want to do in their ideal job. They would click on N if the statement describes something they would not want to do in their ideal job. So here's what this looks like. Here are the 21 statements. They would read the first one. On my ideal job, it is important that I make use of my abilities. And they determine yes or no. On my ideal job, it is important that the work could give me a feeling of accomplishment, yes or no. On my ideal job, it is important that I could be busy all the time, yes or no. And they answer each of these questions. And as they answer each of these questions, the particular statement will turn gray, showing the person that they have answered the question. And if they don't answer the question, they can see that they haven't, and they have to answer each of the questions. So they do this for all 21 statements, and then finally the program will score their results or their input. And so here again, it's the demo version, so this is hardwired. Every time you use the demo version, it's going to come up the same. It says your top 2 work values in order of importance are achievement and independence. And your other work values in order of importance are relationships, working conditions, recognition, and support. Again, like in the interest profiler, they can click on any of those words and come up with a definition for each of those statements. So it's a short definition of about 1 or 2 sentences. They can print out the results, should they wish. But like the interest profiler, they have to select a job zone before they get their listing of occupations. And so again, there's a description of what job zones mean. They make a selection of a job zone. And then after they do that, they get a listing of occupations that match up with their job zone and with their work values profile. And from here then, the ideal is to go to ONET Online and find out more about those occupations. And so we're taking forester, and we went to ONET Online and put in the keyword forester, and up comes the summary report for that occupation. And you just have limited information here on the screenshot, but you can find tasks, knowledge, skills, abilities, work activities, work context, job zone, interests, work styles, work values, related occupations, wages, and employment. So a person can go from their list, looking at any of the occupations, into ONET Online and find out more to see if it really is a reasonable occupation for them to get into. So at this point, there are more questions that have come in, so I want to address some of them. I believe I've addressed, Gary, the top question from Oregon. And then another question, how is the interest profiler different from the self-directed search, and may I use the SDS results and combine with job zone information and get the matching occupations list? You can actually go from the self-directed search, inputting the top interest categories into the program and select the job zone and get results. The self-directed search is another of the many instruments that are based on Holland vocational personality theory. And so one of the great benefits to the interest profiler is that it is no cost. And it's also computerized very easily. Although the self-directed search has a computerized version, it doesn't link up automatically to the occupation list of ONET. So if you have a budget that's fairly generous, you can select from a variety of other instruments that are Holland-based or RIASEC-based. But again, the interest profiler is a free one, and it comes in both paper-pencil version and also computerized version. Another question. I manage a caseload size of 35 people. Can the interest profiler be done effectively over the telephone with a client, or should it always be done in person? Well, the person can actually take the instrument on their own. Both the computerized version and paper-pencil instrument are designed so that it can be self-administered and self-scored. And that works for most people. But then, use your judgment. If you have people that might need help with the directions, it's probably better to have a person there helping the person along to make sure they understand what they're supposed to be doing, deal with the computer appropriately, or understand how to score the paper-pencil version, how to move from the occupational list to ONET Online. So, again, it's kind of a professional judgment call on your end. With regard to doing it on the telephone, I've really never done it by phone before, but if you have a group of people that have taken the instrument, you can certainly help out with the interpretation. If you're sort of on a conference call situation, you can do any kind of preliminary directions that you want to do, have the people take the instrument on their own, and then again help them work through the interpretation. So I think theoretically it can be done by phone if it's organized enough and you know that the people that you're working with can actually work on their own with these instruments. I see another question. Let's see. Approximately how long does it take the average client to complete the work importance profiler? As I mentioned earlier, the general statement is that they take 30 minutes each. But again, for the work importance profiler, I have generally found it takes a little bit longer than 30 minutes. depends on the individual person. Some people will answer the questions directly and quickly, and others will take some time to think about it and will struggle with it just a little bit more because they're just wanting to do a more thoughtful job. So I would say between 30 and 40 minutes for the work importance profiler. Again, for the interest profiler, I've seen people do it in 15 minutes or so, 15, 20 minutes. Again, it depends. You just want to give them the scores, or do you actually want to work through the occupational information, and that takes some time to do. Can you talk about how the values and interests relate? If you take a look at some studies, there are some correlations between some of the interest areas and some of the work values areas. The instruments here do not combine the results, but you can go back to the paper pencil versions and take a look at some of the support materials, and there's what's called a combined master list. And again, you can download this if you don't have it already. You can download it from onetcenter.org. And what the combined master list does is it shows you the occupations for each interest area vice each of the work values areas. So you will see, for example, realistic achievement. You will see realistic support. You will see realistic relationships. And then the other interest areas vice all of the 6 work values. So that's where you can actually combine the results. Can this be accessed from home? Now, one thing that I need to make sure that you understand is this is not an Internet delivered and scored assessment. This is actually a program, an executable program that you put onto your computer. Once it's on there, you can access it from that computer anytime you want. So if you want the program to be on your home computer, just follow the directions that I indicated at the beginning of this webinar and download it onto your home computer. Then it's there for you. It's there for any of your family or any of your clients. But it is not Internet-based and scored. So it's a big difference. It's like downloading Microsoft Word. It's downloaded onto your computer. It's not operated off the Internet. It uses the Internet to download the files, but that's it. All right, adult career seekers in a public employment agency would use the demo version and standard version. Again, the demo version is merely for training. It's just like what I did with you today. I used the demo versions in each case because if I took you through the actual standard versions, I would have to answer all of the items. And so this webinar, instead of being an hour, would probably be closer to 2 to 2.5 hours to work you through. So the demo version, you don't have to answer each item. You can go directly to the results after you give people a feel for what the items are like. So with real people, where you want their unique information, you use the standard version. Okay, and I think there's another question that is coming in. All right, there's a question about how would you use this instrument in working with people who have disabilities. I can't read the rest of the question, so if there's more, oh, here we go. Is there a Spanish version? I don't believe that there is a Spanish version of these instruments. There's Spanish information on the occupations, but I don't believe there's a Spanish version of the instruments. If there's anyone out there who has more experience on this and more information on this than I do, please enter that information in the chat box, but I believe that that's the case. Now, working with people who have disabilities, people with disabilities have interests. People with disabilities have work values, so the instrument measures those same things. You might be referring to maybe people who have visual disabilities, and this probably can be accessed fairly easily with the typical screen reader situations. You also might want to use the paper pencil version, with them. You might want to read the questions to them. That might end up being a little bit difficult with the work importance profiler because it might take a long time for you to read each of the 5 items and get the person to select first most important, second most important, third most important. Again, if there are individuals who have experience with people with disabilities and these instruments, by all means, really unmute your phone and make a comment or enter that information into the chat box. And for now, I think, okay, okay, there's a question that has come in on are there any norms as to what constitutes a higher, low, or moderate level of interest? Basically, it's a comparison. Generally, people have interest in all 6 of the areas, but some are more dominant than others. And you know, it depends on the strength or the gap between and among all of these 6 areas. So technically, there can be a person who has very high interest in all 6 areas, or really strong interest in all 6 areas. And that's sort of a Renaissance person who's interested in everything. Or perhaps they didn't focus on the questions and they just went through it in a mindless fashion, and you need to find that out. A person who has high interest in all 6 categories, you may need to work with and help them identify more about themselves and perhaps go into the occupations with a different set of information, like taking a look at the tasks or knowledge and skills and abilities that are related to those occupations. Or you might want to use the work values. You might have people who are low in all 6 areas. And again, it's an indication that you need to use multiple measures to help people make the kinds of decisions about career exploration and occupational information. Okay, there is, can anyone access this on ONET website and then download the assessment tool? Sure. Yeah, just go to onetcenter.org and there you go. Just start the process, and anyone, anywhere. Doesn't, you know, geographic location doesn't matter. As long as you have internet access, you can access all this information that I'm talking about and more. You know, the Resource Center, ONET Resource Center, has bunches of things that you might find useful, not just the assessment instrument. So take a look at it. All right, I want to mention that we do have other webinars, and I know some of you have attended some of them. And there's a question from Valerie. Is this free to anyone? Yep, absolutely, free to anyone. And then I want to provide you some opportunities. We have on the ONET Knowledge site, we've highlighted some people who are ONET users with some information about them and their photos. So if you're interested in being part of that, go ahead and contact my colleague at that email address that's shown. And then I really would like for you all to be part of podcasts and future webinars. So a podcast is merely an audio recording. I would contact you. We would chat for a little bit. I would formulate some questions, send you the questions. We would do a run-through, and then working with Gary, we would actually do a live recording of me interviewing you about how you use ONET. And the podcast is about 6-7 minutes, so it's not a huge thing. And it's an opportunity for you to showcase yourself, your agency, and how you work with clients and how you find ONET useful to you in particular situations. Also, webinars. I've been doing a lot of webinars for a number of years, but what we want to do now is focus on some of the users. So I'm looking for people who would be willing to be part of a webinar, maybe for like 10-15 minutes at a time, telling people how they're using ONET in their particular agency or institution or set of clientele. And I would help you with the PowerPoint slides. I would moderate the webinar. You would be with perhaps 2 or 3 other people. And I'm looking for people who are willing to do a portion of a webinar on a variety of topics. I mean, the topics are open-ended, but some of examples might be resume writing, ONET with the older worker, vocational rehab, assessment tools, military and transition, research, regional economic development, one-stop centers, dislocated workers, career information delivery systems, and on and on. And it's not just the assessment tool, but it's the occupational information as well, and maybe even in particular the occupational information. So my email address is listed there, sagesolutions@earthlink.net. And if there's any remote interest in doing the podcast or the webinars, please send me an email and I will contact you. This is a really great way for you to help others to understand how ONET information can be utilized. So I'm really counting on you to be part of this and to share the information about how you use ONET information for your clients and students and for your particular agency. So again, when we get off of this webinar, I hope to see several email messages at sagesolutions@earthlink.net telling me you have an interest in a podcast and or a webinar. It can be both. So please go ahead and do that. And I don't see any other questions that have come in. So I do want to thank you very much for your attention and participation in this webinar. And I hope you have a wonderful day.